Imagine discovering a truth so powerful that it has quietly shaped the lives of some of the most remarkable people in history. A truth that helped dreamers turn ideas into empires, helped inventors transform imagination into reality, and helped ordinary individuals rise beyond circumstances that once seemed impossible. For centuries, people have searched for the secret behind extraordinary success. What allows some individuals to rise from nothing and build something extraordinary? Why do certain people persist when others surrender? What gives someone the courage to keep moving forward when the world seems determined to stop them? The answer is not luck. It is not talent alone, and it is not privilege. The real answer is hidden in something far more powerful, something that exists inside every human being. The power of thought, the discipline of action, the courage to persist when failure appears, and the quiet determination to build a life that most people only dream about. Throughout history, individuals like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Marie Curie began their journeys with nothing more than an idea and the belief that their efforts could shape the future. They faced rejection, they faced doubt, they faced failure again and again, yet something inside them refused to give up. That same force exists within you, and in the next few hours, you're about to explore the principles that have shaped the lives of innovators, leaders, creators, and visionaries for generations. This is not just a story about success. It is a journey into the hidden forces that shape human potential. You will discover how ordinary people build extraordinary lives, how discipline transforms dreams into results, how belief influences action, and how persistence turns failure into opportunity. If you listen closely, you may begin to see your own life differently, because the lessons you are about to hear are not distant theories. They are living principles, principles that have guided individuals through adversity, through uncertainty, and toward achievements that once seemed impossible. By the end of this journey, one idea may become clear. The distance between the life you live today and the life you dream about may be far smaller than you ever imagined. And everything begins with a single decision, the decision to keep listening. Because sometimes the ideas that change a life begin with a single story. Part 1. The Power of Opportunity. Imagine standing at the edge of your life, not knowing where the path leads, not knowing whether success belongs to you or to someone else. Many people spend their lives believing that success is a matter of luck. They believe that certain people are simply born with advantages. They believe opportunity belongs only to the fortunate. But history tells a very different story. Again and again, the people who rise to greatness are not the ones who waited for opportunity. They are the ones who created it. They saw possibility where others saw difficulty. They saw a door where others saw only a wall. And sometimes they built the door themselves. Success is rarely a gift. More often, it is the reward given to those who refuse to remain ordinary. And the world, strangely enough, always seems to move aside for the person who knows exactly where they are going. This truth has been demonstrated across centuries of human history. From leaders and inventors, to artists and entrepreneurs, to people who began with almost nothing. The difference between those who succeed and those who remain where they started is rarely intelligence. It is rarely resources. More often, it is something far more powerful. A decision. A decision to move forward. A decision to act. A decision to refuse the quiet voice that whispers, "Maybe this is impossible." History is full of moments when individuals faced what seemed impossible, and yet they moved forward anyway. One such moment occurred before the famous Battle of the Nile. The British fleet was preparing to confront the powerful French forces commanded by Napoleon. Before the battle began, Captain Berry turned to Admiral Horatio Nelson and asked a question that many men would ask in such a situation. If we succeed, what will the world say? Nelson's response revealed the mindset of those who shape history. There is no if in the case, he replied calmly. That we shall succeed is certain. Who may live to tell the tale is another question. Think about that moment. The battle had not yet begun. Victory was far from guaranteed, but Nelson had already made a decision. He had decided the outcome. That certainty, that inner conviction, is often the invisible force behind extraordinary achievement. People who change the world do not begin with perfect conditions. They begin with determination. Another famous example can be seen in the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. When Napoleon prepared to move his army across the Alps through the St. Bernard Pass, many experts insisted the plan was impossible. The terrain was brutal, the weather was unforgiving. Heavy artillery would need to be transported across treacherous mountain paths. Military engineers studied the route and eventually told Napoleon crossing might be possible, but extremely dangerous. Napoleon's response was simple: forward. And so the army moved. 60,000 soldiers, heavy cannons, supplies and equipment, across a path where many believed no army could travel. When the feat was accomplished, many observers later claimed it was not as impossible as people had thought. But that is always the way history works. What seems impossible today becomes obvious tomorrow. The difference is the person who dared to try. Opportunities rarely arrive with bright lights and clear announcements. Most of the time, they appear disguised as difficulty, disguised as work, disguised as responsibility. And only those who are willing to move forward despite uncertainty are able to recognize them. Consider another story. In 1838, a violent storm struck the rocky coast between England and Scotland. Waves crashed against the cliffs with terrifying force. Wind screamed through the night. Inside the long stone lighthouse lived a young woman named Grace Darling. In the early morning hours, she heard something strange. Cries, human cries. She looked through the telescope and saw a horrifying sight. A ship had crashed into the rocks. 9 people clung desperately to the wreckage as waves threatened to sweep them into the sea. The storm was so violent that rescue seemed impossible. Her father, the lighthouse keeper, believed there was nothing they could do. But Grace refused to accept that answer. She insisted they try. Together, they launched a small rowboat into the raging sea. The waves tossed the boat like a leaf. The wind howled around them. Yet Grace rowed beside her father with extraordinary determination. After an exhausting struggle, they reached the wreck. One by one, they pulled the survivors into the small boat. 9 lives were saved that morning. Grace Darling did not possess extraordinary strength. She did not possess special training, but she possessed something far more powerful: the refusal to stand still when action was required. Opportunities often appear exactly like that moment, a situation where most people say, "There is nothing we can do," while a single person says, "Let's try." Another powerful story comes from a young boy named Antonio Canova. At the time, Antonio was not famous. He was not wealthy. He worked as a kitchen servant in a noble household. One evening, the household prepared for a grand banquet attended by distinguished guests. A large decorative sculpture was supposed to stand in the center of the dining table. But just before the dinner began, disaster struck. The professional artist responsible for the decoration accidentally ruined the piece. The servants panicked. The banquet was about to begin, and the centerpiece was destroyed. In the middle of this chaos, a young kitchen servant stepped forward. "If you will let me try," he said quietly, "I think I can make something." The servants laughed, but they had no other action. They gave him butter from the kitchen. Within a short time, the boy sculpted an astonishing figure, a lion, elegant, powerful, beautiful. When the guests entered the dining hall, they were amazed. They asked which famous artist had created such a masterpiece. When they learned the sculpture had been made by a young servant, they were astonished. That servant was Antonio Canova. Years later, he would become one of the greatest sculptors in European history. His opportunity did not arrive as a grand invitation. It arrived as a problem no one else wanted to solve. And that is one of the most important truths about success. Weak people wait for opportunities. Strong people create them. In reality, opportunities surround us every single day. A conversation can be an opportunity. A responsibility can be an opportunity. A challenge can be an opportunity. Even failure can be an opportunity. The difference lies in how we see them. Some people move through life like spectators. They observe events, they comment on them, but they never participate. Others move through life like builders. They act, they attempt, they experiment, and through that action, they slowly shape their future. Every successful person you admire once stood at the same starting line as everyone else. They had uncertainty, they had doubts, they had obstacles, but they refused to wait for perfect conditions. They moved forward, and by moving forward, they discovered that opportunity had been waiting for them all along.
Part 2.
There's a moment in every great life when everything depends on a single decision. A quiet moment. A moment when no one's watching. A moment when the future has not yet been written. It is the moment when a person decides whether to move forward or remain where they are. Most people wait. They wait for certainty. They wait for confidence. They wait for the perfect time. But those who accomplish remarkable things understand something important. The perfect time never arrives. Action always comes first. Confidence follows later. History repeatedly shows that the difference between success and failure often lies in one simple quality: the courage to begin. Many of the individuals we admire today did not begin with advantages. They began with uncertainty. They began with fear. They began with doubt. But they began anyway. Take, for example, the life of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln did not grow up surrounded by opportunity. He was born in a small log cabin in rural America. His family was poor. Books were rare. Formal education was limited. Yet from a young age, Lincoln possessed a powerful desire to learn. At night, after long days of hard labor, he would sit near the fireplace and read whatever books he could find. Sometimes he borrowed books from neighbors miles away. Sometimes he walked long distances just to obtain something to read. The glow of the fire became his classroom. The quiet of the night became his teacher. There were no guarantees that his effort would lead anywhere. There was no promise of success. But Lincoln continued to move forward, one page at a time, one idea at a time, one step at a time. Years later, that same boy who studied beside the fire would become one of the most influential leaders in American history. What transformed a poor boy into a president? It was not luck. It was not privilege. It was the courage to begin and the discipline to continue. This principle can be seen again and again in the lives of remarkable individuals. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. As a child, Edison struggled in school. Teachers believed he was slow. Some thought he lacked the ability to succeed academically. Eventually, his mother removed him from school and began teaching him at home. Instead of accepting the judgment of others, Edison developed an intense curiosity about the world. He began experimenting. He built small laboratories. He asked questions constantly. Many of his experiments failed. Some even exploded. But Edison did not see failure the way most people do. He saw each failed experiment as information. Each mistake was simply another step closer to discovery. Later in life, Edison would become one of the most prolific inventors in history. His work helped shape modern technology. Yet his achievements did not begin with success. They began with curiosity. They began with courage. The courage to try something that might not work. This same principle appears in countless other stories. There was a young man who worked long hours as a clerk in a small store. His job was repetitive. The days were predictable. Many people would have accepted such a life and never questioned it. But this young man had a different mindset. He studied business. He observed customers. He thought constantly about how businesses could operate more efficiently. That young clerk eventually became John D. Rockefeller. Through careful thinking, disciplined effort, and bold decisions, he built one of the most powerful business enterprises in the world. But again, the beginning was ordinary, almost invisible, just a young man working in a store. The world often celebrates the final victory, but rarely does it pay attention to the quiet beginning. And yet the beginning is where everything truly happens. Every invention begins as an idea. Every great career begins with a first step. Every success begins with an attempt. Unfortunately, many people never experience that transformation because they allow fear to control their actions. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of uncertainty. Fear has an incredible ability to paralyze human potential. It convinces people to remain comfortable rather than courageous. It whispers that it is safer to stay where you are. But the truth is this: every successful person you admire once stood exactly where you stand now, at the beginning, uncertain, unproven, unknown. The only difference is that they decided to move forward anyway. Another powerful example can be found in the life of Helen Keller. When Helen Keller was only 19 months old, an illness left her both deaf and blind. Imagine what that meant in the late 19th century. She could not hear words. She could not see faces. Communication seemed almost impossible. Many believed she would never live a normal life. But Helen Keller refused to accept that limitation. With the help of her extraordinary teacher, Anne Sullivan, she slowly learned to communicate through touch. Words were spelled into her hand. Concepts slowly formed. Understanding grew. What began as a silent world eventually opened into one filled with knowledge, language, and purpose. Helen Keller went on to graduate from college, write books, and become an international speaker who inspired millions. Her story reminds us of something deeply important. Human potential is far greater than most people imagine. The limits we believe in are often illusions. Barriers exist, difficulties exist, but the human spirit possesses a remarkable ability to overcome them. And once again, everything begins with a decision. The decision to try. The decision to learn. The decision to continue. Many people spend years waiting for motivation. They believe they must feel ready before they begin. But motivation rarely works that way. Action creates motivation. Movement creates confidence. Progress creates belief. When a person takes the first step, something remarkable happens. Energy appears. Ideas appear. Momentum begins to build. Opportunities that once seemed invisible start to appear. The path becomes clearer only after movement begins. Think of life as a journey through a dark forest. If you stand still, the darkness surrounds you. But when you take a step forward, the path begins to reveal itself, step by step, moment by moment. The great tragedy of life is not failure. Failure is temporary. Failure teaches. Failure strengthens. The true tragedy is hesitation, the years that pass while someone waits for the perfect moment, the dreams that slowly fade because action never begins. History does not belong to those who waited. It belongs to those who acted. It belongs to those who began. So wherever you stand today, whatever your circumstances may be, remember this truth. You do not need perfect conditions to begin. You do not need certainty to begin. You do not need approval to begin. You only need courage. Because the moment you begin, you step onto the path that leads forward. And once that journey starts, your life will never be the same again.
Part 3.
Turning obstacles into power. Every meaningful journey contains obstacles. No one escapes them. They appear in different forms. Sometimes they arrive as poverty, sometimes as rejection, sometimes as failure, sometimes as circumstances that seem completely beyond our control. Yet when we look closely at the lives of extraordinary individuals, something surprising becomes clear. The obstacles that seemed most destructive often became the very forces that shaped their success. What most people see as a barrier, great achievers learn to use as fuel. At first, this idea may sound strange. How could difficulty ever become an advantage? But history provides countless examples that reveal a powerful truth. Hardship often awakens abilities that comfort never could. Consider the early life of Frederick Douglass. He was born into slavery in the United States. From the moment of his birth, his freedom was denied. Education was forbidden. The system around him was designed to keep him powerless. Yet within that harsh environment, Douglass discovered something extraordinary, a burning desire to learn. When he was still a child, he secretly began learning the alphabet. Later, he traded bread with poor white children in exchange for reading lessons. Each small discovery became a step toward a larger transformation. Words opened doors in his mind. Ideas expanded his understanding of the world, and knowledge slowly awakened a powerful determination. Frederick Douglass eventually escaped slavery. He became one of the most powerful voices for freedom in American history. A writer, an orator, a leader. But his greatness was not born from comfort. It was forged in adversity. The obstacle that tried to imprison his life became the force that sharpened his mind and strengthened his will. This pattern appears again and again throughout history. Great difficulty often produces great character. Comfort rarely does. Another striking example can be found in the life of Ulysses S. Grant. Before he became a legendary general during the American Civil War, Grant experienced years of disappointment. He struggled financially. Business ventures failed. At one point, he was forced to work in his father's leather store simply to survive. Many people assumed his life would remain ordinary, perhaps even unsuccessful. But when the Civil War began, something remarkable happened. Grant discovered a talent for leadership that few had ever recognized. Under pressure, he remained calm. Under uncertainty, he remained decisive. He understood that victory often required persistence rather than brilliance. During one campaign, he was badly injured after falling from a horse. Yet even while in severe pain, he traveled to take command of Union forces at Chattanooga. The situation was desperate. Supplies were cut off. Enemy forces surrounded the city. Many believed defeat was inevitable. But Grant immediately organized a bold strategy. He ordered an advance. Within days, Union forces captured the surrounding hills and broke the enemy siege. Everything changed. Grant's rise to prominence did not occur because his life had been easy. It occurred because hardship had prepared him for the moment when leadership was required. Obstacles had trained him. They had strengthened his resilience. They had built the mental endurance necessary to face enormous challenges. And this leads to an important realization. Obstacles are not merely interruptions in life's path. Often they are the path. They develop patience. They develop strength. They develop creativity. When a person faces difficulty, two choices appear. The first is retreat. The second is growth. Many people choose retreat. They step back. They lower their ambitions. They convince themselves that success belongs to someone else. But those who grow stronger through difficulty understand something different. They understand that every obstacle contains information. Every challenge contains lessons. Every struggle contains hidden training. One of the greatest inventors in history demonstrated this principle clearly. Thomas Edison conducted thousands of experiments while attempting to develop the electric light bulb. Again and again, his attempts failed. Materials burned out. Designs malfunctioned. Experiments produced disappointing results. After hundreds of failures, someone asked Edison how it felt to fail so many times. His response became legendary. "I have not failed," he explained. "I have simply found thousands of ways that do not work." This mindset reveals a powerful psychological advantage. Where others saw failure, Edison saw progress. Each experiment brought him closer to success. Each mistake eliminated another possibility. Instead of discouragement, he experienced curiosity. Eventually, his persistence paid off. The electric light bulb changed the world. Cities illuminated their streets. Homes filled with light. Industries transformed. And behind that revolutionary invention stood thousands of small failures that had slowly paved the road to success. This pattern exists in every field. Athletes experience defeats. Scientists experience failed experiments. Writers experience rejection. Entrepreneurs experience financial setbacks. Yet those who ultimately succeed are not the ones who avoid obstacles. They are the ones who refuse to surrender to them. A similar lesson appears in the life of Helen Keller. Living without sight and hearing presented unimaginable challenges. Yet those challenges forced her to develop extraordinary mental strength. Through perseverance and the guidance of Anne Sullivan, she learned to communicate in ways that astonished the world. She learned to read through touch. She learned to speak. She learned to write. Eventually, she became an author and speaker whose words inspired millions. The world often views obstacles as unfair interruptions, but from another perspective, obstacles can become powerful teachers. They reveal our weaknesses. They expose our fears. They force us to adapt. And adaptation is one of the most powerful abilities any human can develop. Nature itself demonstrates this principle. Muscles grow stronger through resistance. Steel becomes stronger through heat. Diamonds form under intense pressure. Human character develops in the same way. Pressure shapes it. Difficulty sharpens it. Adversity reveals it. Of course, obstacles are never pleasant. No one enjoys struggle. No one welcomes hardship. But those who achieve greatness learn to interpret difficulty differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can this teach me?" This shift in perspective transforms everything. Instead of feeling defeated, a person becomes curious. Instead of surrendering, they begin searching for solutions. Instead of shrinking, they grow. Many of the greatest breakthroughs in history were born during moments when individuals refused to accept defeat. They studied the problem. They experimented.
they tried again, and through persistence, they eventually discovered something new. In truth, the path to success rarely follows a straight line. It twists, it turns, it rises and falls. But each obstacle contains an invitation to become stronger, an invitation to become more wise, an invitation to become more determined than ever before. Those who accept that invitation discover a powerful secret. Obstacles do not block the road, they build the road. And those who learn how to transform difficulty into strength eventually reach places that once seemed impossible.
Part 4. There is a quality that appears quietly in the background of every great achievement. It does not attract attention, it rarely appears in headlines, it is not dramatic, yet without it, almost nothing meaningful would ever be accomplished. That quality is persistence. Many people believe success belongs to those with extraordinary intelligence. Others believe it belongs to those with special talents or advantages. But when we look closely at history, we discover something surprising. Talent often starts the journey, but persistence finishes it. The world is full of people who began with promise, bright minds, creative ideas, powerful dreams. Yet somewhere along the way, they stopped. They encountered difficulty, they faced criticism, they experienced failure, and they allowed those obstacles to convince them that their journey should end. But the individuals who rise above the crowd possess a different mindset. They continue, even when progress is slow, even when results are uncertain, even when the world doubts them. They continue. Persistence is not dramatic. It does not happen in a single heroic moment. It appears in small decisions repeated day after day. The decision to try again, the decision to work a little longer, the decision to refuse defeat. And over time, those small decisions accumulate into something powerful, momentum. One of the most striking examples of persistence can be seen in the life of Thomas Edison. Edison conducted thousands of experiments while attempting to perfect the electric light. Again and again his attempts failed. Filaments burned too quickly, materials broke under heat, designs refused to function properly. To many observers, the project looked hopeless. But Edison did not interpret the situation as failure. He viewed it as progress. Every unsuccessful experiment eliminated another wrong possibility. Every setback brought him closer to the right solution. Eventually, after extraordinary persistence, the electric light bulb became a reality. The invention did more than illuminate rooms, it transformed the modern world. Cities could operate after sunset, factories could function through the night, entire industries evolved because one individual refused to abandon his work. The lesson is simple. Persistence turns effort into results. Another powerful story can be found in the life of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's life was not a smooth climb toward success. In fact, it was filled with setbacks. He lost elections, business ventures failed, personal tragedies deeply affected him. At several moments in his life, discouragement nearly overwhelmed him. Many people facing such a series of disappointments would have withdrawn from public life entirely. But Lincoln possessed remarkable persistence. He continued studying. He continued speaking. He continued developing his ideas about leadership and justice. Eventually, his persistence led him to the highest office in the United States. As president, he guided the nation through one of the most difficult periods in its history during the American Civil War. Lincoln's story reminds us that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure often is part of the journey toward it. The difference lies in whether a person stops or continues. Persistence appears in many forms. Sometimes it is physical endurance. Sometimes it is emotional resilience. Sometimes it is intellectual determination. But in every case, it represents the refusal to surrender. A fascinating example of persistence appears in the life of Helen Keller. Deaf and blind from early childhood, she faced challenges that most people can hardly imagine. Communication itself seemed impossible. Yet, with the patient guidance of her teacher, Anne Sullivan, she slowly began to understand language. Learning each word required enormous effort. Every concept had to be experienced through touch. But Keller persisted, day after day, word after word. Eventually, she learned to read, write, and speak. She attended college, she wrote books, she traveled the world giving speeches that inspired millions. Her achievements were not the result of easy circumstances. They were the result of persistence that refused to yield to limitation. These stories reveal something deeply important. Persistence often matters more than speed. In a world that celebrates quick success, many people feel discouraged when progress appears slow. They assume that if results do not appear quickly, the effort must not be worthwhile. But meaningful achievements often require time. Time to learn, time to experiment, time to improve. Nature itself operates through persistence. A river carves through stone, not through sudden force, but through constant movement, drop by drop, day by day, year by year. Eventually, even the hardest rock yields. Human success often follows the same pattern. Small efforts repeated consistently produce extraordinary outcomes. Unfortunately, many people underestimate the power of small progress. They expect dramatic change. When it does not appear, they lose motivation. But those who understand persistence recognize a different truth. Great transformations often begin invisibly. An author writes a page each day. A student studies a little each night. An inventor experiments again and again. At first, the progress appears small, almost insignificant, but months pass, years pass, and slowly the accumulated effort produces remarkable results. The world often celebrates the final achievement, the published book, the successful company, the groundbreaking invention, but behind every visible success stands thousands of invisible hours of persistence. Another example of remarkable perseverance can be seen in the career of Mark Twain. Before becoming one of the most famous writers in American literature, Twain experienced repeated failures. Business ventures collapsed, investments disappeared, financial difficulties forced him into debt. Yet Twain continued writing. He continued refining his voice as a storyteller. Eventually, his works captured the imagination of readers around the world. His stories combined humor, insight, and powerful observations about human nature. What transformed a struggling writer into a literary legend? Persistence, the quiet determination to continue creating even when circumstances were difficult. Persistence also develops confidence. Each time a person continues despite difficulty, they prove something to themselves. They discover their own strength. They realize that setbacks are temporary, and with each challenge overcome, their belief in their own abilities grows stronger. Confidence built through persistence is far more powerful than confidence built through comfort. It is earned, it is tested, it becomes unshakable. When people ask the secret behind extraordinary success, they often expect a complicated answer, but the truth is surprisingly simple. Success often belongs to the person who stayed in the game longer than anyone else, the person who tried one more time, the person who worked one more day, the person who refused to give up. Persistence does not guarantee instant victory, but it dramatically increases the probability of eventual success. And perhaps even more importantly, persistence transforms the person who practices it. It builds discipline, it builds character, it builds resilience. Over time, the individual who persists becomes stronger, wiser, and more capable than the person who began the journey. In the end, persistence is not merely a tool for achieving goals. It is a force that shapes the individual who uses it. And those who cultivate that force eventually discover something remarkable. What once seemed impossible becomes inevitable.
Part 5. The Discipline of Great Achievers. If you study the lives of remarkable individuals long enough, you begin to notice something interesting. Their success rarely came from a single brilliant moment. It rarely came from luck, and it almost never appeared suddenly. Instead, it was built quietly, through discipline. Discipline is one of the least glamorous qualities associated with success. It does not feel exciting. It does not feel dramatic. It often feels repetitive, sometimes even boring. Yet discipline is the invisible structure that supports every great achievement. Without it, dreams remain ideas. With it, ideas become reality. Many people admire successful individuals and assume they possess extraordinary motivation. But motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls. Some days it appears strong. Other days it disappears entirely. Discipline is different. Discipline continues working even when motivation is absent. It is the decision to do what must be done, whether you feel inspired or not. One of the most powerful demonstrations of disciplined effort can be seen in the life of Benjamin Franklin. Franklin did not begin life as a wealthy or influential figure. He was born into a large family with limited financial resources. Formal education ended early for him. Yet Franklin possessed something far more powerful than privilege. He possessed an intense commitment to self-improvement. As a young man, he developed a personal system for building discipline. He created a list of virtues he wanted to cultivate in his life. These virtues included qualities such as honesty, industry, humility, and moderation. Every day he examined his behavior. Every day he asked himself whether his actions aligned with those principles. He even kept a small notebook where he tracked his progress, day by day, week by week, month by month. This process of constant self-observation created powerful discipline. Franklin used his time carefully. He studied relentlessly. He improved his writing. He experimented with science. He developed ideas about business, politics, and philosophy. Eventually, he became one of the most influential thinkers and leaders of his time. But Franklin's greatness was not the result of sudden genius. It was the result of disciplined effort repeated over many years. Another powerful example of disciplined work can be found in the life of Theodore Roosevelt. As a child, Roosevelt was physically weak. He suffered from severe asthma. Doctors doubted he would ever develop strong health. But Roosevelt refused to accept that limitation. With determination, he began building physical strength. He exercised daily. He trained his body. He spent time outdoors developing endurance and resilience. Over time, his health improved dramatically. The once fragile boy transformed into a vigorous and energetic man. But Roosevelt's discipline extended far beyond physical strength. He also cultivated intellectual discipline. He read constantly. He wrote extensively. He studied history, politics, and science. Throughout his life, Roosevelt maintained an astonishing level of productivity. His discipline allowed him to serve as a soldier, author, reformer, and eventually President of the United States. The pattern is clear. Discipline multiplies human potential. Without discipline, talent remains unused. With discipline, even ordinary ability can produce extraordinary results. In fact, many successful individuals openly admit that they were not the most naturally gifted people in their field. What distinguished them was their willingness to practice longer, to study deeper, to improve continuously. Discipline transforms effort into progress. Another example can be seen in the career of Mark Twain. Before achieving literary fame, Twain spent years developing his craft. Writing is rarely easy. Ideas must be shaped. Sentences must be refined. Stories must be revised again and again. Yet Twain approached writing with remarkable discipline. He wrote regularly. He observed people carefully. He collected experiences that later became powerful stories. Through consistent effort, he developed a unique voice that readers found both humorous and deeply insightful. Eventually, his works became some of the most beloved pieces of American literature. But behind that success stood countless hours of disciplined writing. What many people fail to understand is that discipline simplifies life. It removes the need for constant decision-making. When a person develops strong habits, action becomes automatic. The writer writes each day. The student studies each night. The athlete trains regularly. The entrepreneur continues building the business step by step. Over time, discipline creates momentum. Momentum makes progress easier, and progress builds confidence. Another fascinating example of disciplined learning appears in the life of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln had very little formal education, yet he possessed an incredible hunger for knowledge. Whenever he found a book, he read it carefully. He studied law independently. He practiced writing and public speaking. Often he would rewrite passages from books simply to understand the structure of the language. This disciplined self-education eventually shaped him into one of the most powerful speakers in American political history. His speeches were clear. His arguments were logical. His words carried deep emotional force. But those abilities were not accidental. They were the result of disciplined practice over many years. The truth is that discipline rarely produces immediate rewards. In the beginning, the effort may feel invisible. A student studies for hours without obvious results. A writer fills notebooks with drafts that no one reads. An inventor performs experiments that seem unsuccessful. But discipline slowly builds a foundation, and eventually, that foundation supports remarkable achievements. Think of discipline as planting seeds. When seeds are first planted, nothing appears above the surface. Days pass, weeks pass, yet beneath the soil, roots are forming. Growth is happening silently. Then one day, the first signs of life appear, and once growth begins, it accelerates. The same process occurs in personal development. Disciplined effort may appear invisible at first, but eventually the results become impossible to ignore. Skills improve, knowledge expands, confidence grows, and opportunities begin to appear. Those who cultivate discipline discover an extraordinary advantage. While others depend on inspiration, they depend on habits. While others wait for motivation, they continue working. And over time, that consistency creates remarkable outcomes. In truth, discipline is not about restriction, it is about freedom. The freedom to shape your future, the freedom to develop your potential, the freedom to transform dreams into reality. Every great achievement begins with a decision, but it is discipline that carries that decision forward day after day. And those who embrace discipline eventually discover something powerful. They are no longer controlled by circumstances. They become the architects of their own lives.
Part 6.
How ordinary people build extraordinary lives. One of the greatest myths about success is the belief that extraordinary lives are reserved for extraordinary people. Many individuals quietly assume that greatness belongs only to those born with rare talent, special connections, or unusual advantages. But history tells a very different story. Again and again, the individuals who transform the world begin their journeys in the most ordinary circumstances imaginable. They are not born with fame. They are not surrounded by privilege. Often, they begin with very little at all. What distinguishes them is not where they start. It is how they think, how they act, and how they respond to opportunity. Consider the early life of Andrew Carnegie.
Carnegie was born into a poor family in Scotland. His father struggled to earn a living as a weaver during a time when industrial changes were destroying traditional jobs. When Carnegie was still a young boy, his family immigrated to the United States, searching for a better future. Life was not easy. Carnegie began working at a young age in a cotton factory. His job involved long hours and exhausting labor. Many people in similar circumstances would have accepted that life as permanent. But Carnegie possessed something powerful, a relentless desire to improve his situation. He observed everything around him. He learned constantly. He read books whenever he had the opportunity. Little by little, he developed knowledge about business, investment, and industry. Eventually, he began investing in railroads and steel production. Through persistence and intelligent decision-making, he built one of the largest steel empires in history. From poverty to immense wealth, Carnegie's life demonstrated a powerful truth. Great beginnings are not required for great achievements. Another inspiring example can be found in the life of Henry Ford. Henry was not born into wealth or privilege. He grew up on a farm in Michigan where life revolved around hard work and practical skills. Yet from an early age, Ford showed intense curiosity about machines. He loved understanding how things worked. He repaired watches. He experimented with engines. He constantly explored mechanical ideas. Eventually, Ford became fascinated with the possibility of creating a practical automobile for ordinary people. At the time, automobiles were expensive and rare. Most were handmade and affordable only for the wealthy. Ford believed something radical. He believed that machines could be produced efficiently enough for everyday families. His early attempts failed. Several of his companies collapsed. Investors lost confidence. Many people considered his ideas unrealistic. But Ford continued refining his vision. Eventually, he introduced the Model T. This automobile changed transportation forever. By developing efficient assembly line production, Ford made automobiles affordable for millions of people. The world suddenly became more connected. Cities expanded. Travel transformed daily life. Ford's achievement began with curiosity and persistence, not privilege. Another inspiring example can be found in the life of Oprah Winfrey. Oprah's early life was filled with enormous challenges. She was born into poverty in rural Mississippi. Her childhood included hardship, instability, and painful experiences. Few people looking at those early circumstances would have predicted extraordinary success. Yet Winfrey possessed an ability that would later define her career. She had a powerful gift for communication. She listened deeply. She spoke with authenticity. She connected with people on an emotional level. Starting as a local television reporter, she gradually developed a reputation for sincerity and empathy. Eventually, she hosted a daytime talk show that became one of the most influential programs in television history. Her voice reached millions of people around the world. But beyond media success, she also built businesses, supported education initiatives, and inspired audiences through powerful messages of personal growth. Her life demonstrated that adversity does not determine destiny. Another powerful example is Walt Disney. Before creating one of the most influential entertainment companies in history, Disney experienced repeated failure. His early animation studio collapsed. Financial problems forced him into bankruptcy. At one point, he was even fired from a newspaper job because editors believed he lacked creativity. But Disney refused to abandon his imagination. He continued experimenting with storytelling and animation. Eventually, he created a character that would change entertainment forever: Mickey Mouse. This simple animated character captured the imagination of audiences around the world. Disney continued expanding his creative vision, building films, theme parks, and storytelling experiences that inspired generations. What allowed Disney to succeed where others might have given up? Persistence, vision, and the willingness to continue believing in ideas that others could not yet see. These stories reveal an important truth. Extraordinary lives rarely begin with extraordinary circumstances. They begin with ordinary people who refuse to remain ordinary. They learn, they adapt, they grow, and they continue moving forward even when progress appears slow. Opportunity often hides inside everyday moments. A conversation, a new idea, a skill learned quietly through practice. Those who build extraordinary lives pay attention to these moments. They treat learning as a lifelong habit. They remain curious about the world around them, and they take action when opportunity appears. Another fascinating example is Steve Jobs. Jobs was adopted as an infant and raised by a working-class family. As a young man, he explored electronics, design, and philosophy. He dropped out of college. He traveled. He experimented with ideas. Eventually, together with Steve Wozniak, he co-founded Apple in a small garage. The early computers they created would eventually revolutionize personal technology. But Jobs' journey was not smooth. At one point, he was even removed from the company he helped create. For many people, that moment would have ended the story. But Jobs treated the setback as an opportunity. He founded new companies. He refined his ideas about design and innovation. Years later, he returned to Apple and led the company into a new era of groundbreaking products. His life demonstrated that extraordinary impact often emerges from unconventional paths. What do all these individuals share in common? They began as ordinary people. They faced uncertainty. They encountered failure, but they refused to stop growing. They remained curious. They remained determined, and slowly, step by step, they transformed their lives. This realization carries an empowering message. Extraordinary potential exists within ordinary individuals, not because they possess magical abilities, but because they choose to act. They choose to learn. They choose to persist. Over time, those choices accumulate, and eventually, what once seemed impossible begins to appear inevitable. The truth is simple. Extraordinary lives are not reserved for a select few. They are built, day by day, by ordinary people who refuse to stop moving forward.
Part 7. The Power of Thought and Belief. Long before any great achievement appears in the world, something important happens quietly within the human mind. An idea forms, a belief grows, a possibility begins to take shape. Everything that humans build, create, invent, or accomplish begins first as a thought. The buildings in great cities were once ideas in the minds of architects. Scientific discoveries began as questions in the minds of researchers. Powerful movements that changed nations began as beliefs inside determined individuals. Thought is the invisible starting point of action, and belief is the force that gives thought its power. Many people underestimate how strongly their thoughts influence the direction of their lives. They assume that circumstances control their future. They assume that luck determines their opportunities. But individuals who study the patterns of success discover something very different. The way a person thinks about themselves and their possibilities often determines the actions they take, and those actions shape the results they experience. Consider the life of Henry Ford. Before automobiles became common, most people believed they would remain luxury machines for the wealthy. The idea of ordinary families owning cars seemed unrealistic. Yet Ford believed something different. He believed machines could be built efficiently enough for everyday people. This belief guided his thinking. It guided his experiments. It guided his relentless effort to simplify production. Eventually, he created the Model T and introduced revolutionary assembly line manufacturing. What once seemed impossible became ordinary. Roads filled with automobiles. Travel became faster. Society changed dramatically. But the transformation began with a belief that others could not yet see. Belief often allows individuals to continue working toward goals that appear distant or difficult. Without belief, discouragement arrives quickly. But when belief is strong, obstacles appear temporary. Another powerful example can be seen in the life of Marie Curie. Curie's scientific work required extraordinary patience and determination. She spent years studying mysterious forms of energy that scientists barely understood. Her research eventually led to the discovery of two new elements, polonium and radium. At the time, these discoveries revolutionized scientific understanding of radiation and atomic structure. But Curie's journey was filled with challenges. Laboratory resources were limited. Experiments required exhausting physical effort. Progress was slow. Yet Curie believed deeply in the importance of her work. That belief sustained her through years of difficult research. Eventually, she became the first person ever to win 2 Nobel Prize awards in different scientific fields. Her achievements reshaped modern science, but once again, the beginning was a thought and the strength of belief behind it. Thought and belief also influence personal confidence. When individuals repeatedly tell themselves that success is impossible, their actions become cautious. Opportunities pass unnoticed. Effort decreases. But when individuals believe improvement is possible, their behavior changes. They experiment, they learn, they take initiative. Over time, those actions produce results that reinforce the original belief. In this way, belief can become a powerful self-fulfilling force. A fascinating example appears in the career of Thomas Edison. Edison conducted thousands of experiments while developing practical electrical inventions. Many of these experiments failed, yet Edison maintained an unusual mindset. He believed that each failed attempt contained valuable information. Instead of interpreting setbacks as defeat, he interpreted them as progress. This belief allowed him to maintain curiosity rather than frustration. Eventually, his work produced revolutionary innovations, including improvements to electric lighting and power systems. The modern technological world owes much to the persistence of that mindset. Thought patterns also influence not only individual achievement, but also leadership. Leaders who believe in possibility often inspire others to see opportunities that previously seemed invisible. Consider Martin Luther King Jr. During a time of deep racial division in the United States, King spoke about a vision of equality and justice. Many people believed such change was impossible. The social systems of the time seemed too powerful to overcome. Yet King held firmly to a belief in peaceful transformation. His speeches inspired millions. One of the most famous speeches in modern history, delivered during the March on Washington, described a vision of a more just society. That vision helped energize the movement for civil rights. Over time, laws changed, attitudes began to evolve, and the influence of that belief continues to echo through history.
Thoughts and beliefs also influence the emotional climate of the mind. Optimistic thinking creates energy. Creative thinking produces solutions. Courageous thinking encourages action. Negative thinking often produces hesitation, doubt, and fear. This does not mean that successful individuals ignore difficulties. In fact, many of them examine problems very carefully. But they approach those problems with a different perspective. Instead of assuming defeat, they search for possibilities. They ask questions. They explore alternatives. They believe that solutions exist, and that belief keeps them moving forward. Another powerful example of belief transforming reality appears in the life of Nelson Mandela. Mandela spent 27 years imprisoned for opposing apartheid in South Africa. Many people would have emerged from such an experience filled with bitterness. But Mandela maintained a remarkable belief. He believed reconciliation was possible. He believed the country could build a future based on cooperation rather than revenge. Once he was finally released from prison, he helped guide South Africa through a peaceful political transition. His leadership prevented widespread violence and created a path toward democratic governance. Once again, belief shaped action, and action reshaped history. The lesson from these stories is not that belief alone produces success. Belief must be combined with effort, discipline, and persistence. But belief creates the mental foundation upon which those efforts are built. Without belief, effort collapses. With belief, effort becomes powerful. The human mind is an extraordinary instrument. It can imagine possibilities that do not yet exist. It can design solutions to complex problems. It can inspire courage during difficult moments. But the direction of that power depends on the thoughts we cultivate. Thoughts influence beliefs. Beliefs influence actions. Actions influence results. And over time, those results shape the course of a life. The individuals who accomplish remarkable things understand this connection. They guard their thoughts carefully. They choose beliefs that strengthen them rather than weaken them. They focus on possibilities rather than limitations. And through that mindset, they unlock levels of potential that others rarely discover. Everything begins with a thought. Everything grows through belief. And when thought and belief combine with disciplined action, they become forces capable of transforming the world.
The courage to take action. Ideas are powerful. Beliefs are powerful. But neither ideas nor beliefs change the world on their own. Something else must happen. Action. Throughout history, the individuals who transformed industries, inspired nations, and created lasting achievements all shared one essential quality. They acted. They did not wait for perfect conditions. They did not wait for absolute certainty. They did not wait until fear disappeared. They moved forward despite uncertainty. And that willingness to act separated them from the countless others who only imagined success. Many people spend years thinking about what they want to accomplish. They imagine the business they could start, the book they could write, the skills they could develop. But imagination alone produces nothing. Without action, even the most brilliant idea remains only a possibility. Taking action often requires courage, because action invites risk. It invites criticism. It invites the possibility of failure. But history repeatedly demonstrates that progress belongs to those who are willing to step forward when others hesitate. Consider the life of Amelia Earhart. At a time when aviation was still new and dangerous, Earhart became fascinated with the idea of flight. Many people believed aviation was too risky,
and even more believed that women should not pursue such dangerous careers. Yet Earhart refused to accept those limitations. She trained as a pilot. She practiced relentlessly. Eventually, she accomplished something extraordinary. She became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Her achievement inspired countless individuals and expanded the possibilities for women in aviation. But her accomplishment began with a simple yet courageous decision: the decision to act. Another powerful example can be seen in the life of Walt Disney. Disney possessed an extraordinary imagination. He dreamed of creating new forms of entertainment that combined storytelling, art, and technology. But imagination alone would not have created the worlds he envisioned. Disney had to act. He started small animation studios. Some of them failed. Financial problems threatened his projects. At times, he faced enormous pressure and uncertainty. Yet he continued moving forward. He created animated characters. He experimented with new techniques. Eventually, he produced films that captivated audiences across the world. Later, he expanded his vision even further by creating Disneyland, a place where imagination could become a physical experience. Millions of visitors have walked through those gates since it first opened. But the park began as a risky idea that many investors believed would fail. Disney moved forward anyway. Action transforms potential into reality. Without action, the future remains unchanged. But when individuals begin acting on their ideas, new opportunities often appear. The process is similar to walking through darkness with a small lantern. At first, the light only reveals a few steps ahead, but as you continue moving forward, more of the path becomes visible. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. Another fascinating example can be found in the life of Elon Musk. Musk became known for pursuing ambitious ideas that many experts considered unrealistic. He helped build companies focused on electric vehicles, renewable energy, and space exploration. One of those companies, SpaceX, attempted to reduce the cost of launching rockets into space. In the beginning, the company experienced multiple failures. Early rocket launches exploded or crashed. Financial pressure increased. Many observers predicted the company would collapse. But Musk continued pushing forward. Engineers analyzed each failure. Designs were improved. Experiments continued. Eventually, SpaceX succeeded in launching reusable rockets, dramatically changing the economics of space travel. Once again, action turned a seemingly impossible vision into reality. The world often celebrates the final achievement, but what truly matters is the moment when someone chooses to act. That moment changes everything. Action also builds confidence. Many people wait to feel confident before they begin. But confidence rarely appears in advance. It grows through experience. Each action taken reduces uncertainty. Each step forward creates new knowledge. Over time, the person who acts becomes more capable and more prepared. Even mistakes become valuable teachers. Consider the early career of J.K. Rowling. Before becoming one of the most widely read authors in the world, Rowling faced many difficulties. She struggled financially. She wrote while raising her child as a single parent. Publishers rejected her manuscript multiple times. But Rowling continued submitting her work. Eventually, one publisher decided to take a chance on her story. That story introduced readers to Harry Potter. The series became a global literary phenomenon. Millions of readers discovered the magical world she created. Films, merchandise, and cultural influence followed. But none of it would have existed if Rowling had stopped after the first rejection. Her success began with action. sending the manuscript, trying again, continuing despite uncertainty. The same principle applies in every field. Entrepreneurs launch ideas that may or may not succeed. Scientists conduct experiments whose results are unknown. Artists create work that audiences may or may not appreciate. But those who never act never discover what might have been possible. Taking action does not mean acting recklessly. Successful individuals often plan carefully. They study their fields. They prepare themselves with knowledge and skill. But eventually, preparation must be followed by movement, because progress requires motion. One of the most powerful truths about action is that it changes the person who takes it. Every attempt builds experience. Every challenge builds resilience. Every achievement builds confidence. The person who repeatedly takes action gradually becomes stronger, wiser, and more capable. And with each step forward, the gap between imagination and reality becomes smaller. In the end, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to move forward despite fear. And those who learn to take action, even imperfect action, discover something extraordinary. The future begins to respond to their effort. Opportunities appear, skills develop, possibilities expand, and what once existed only in the mind slowly begins to exist in the world.
Part 9. Resilience and the Art of Rising Again. Every meaningful journey eventually reaches a moment when progress seems to stop. Plans fail, effort appears wasted, circumstances change unexpectedly. In these moments, many people feel an overwhelming sense of discouragement. They question their abilities. They question their goals. Sometimes they even question whether continuing the journey makes sense at all. But among the individuals who achieve extraordinary success, a different response often appears. Instead of surrendering to difficulty, they adapt. They rise again. This ability is known as resilience. Resilience is the capacity to recover from setbacks and continue moving forward. It does not mean avoiding failure. In fact, resilient individuals often experience failure more frequently than others. But they respond to those failures differently. They treat them as information rather than defeat. They analyze what went wrong, they adjust their strategies, and then they try again. History offers countless examples of resilience shaping remarkable lives. Consider the career of Steve Jobs. Jobs helped create Apple, a company that would eventually revolutionize personal technology. But in the mid-1980s, something unexpected happened. Internal conflicts led to Jobs being removed from the company he had helped build. For many people, such an experience would have been devastating. Imagine dedicating years of effort to creating something, only to be pushed out of it. Yet Jobs later described that moment as one of the most important turning points in his life. Instead of surrendering to disappointment, he began again. He founded a new company called Next, and later purchased a small animation studio that would become Pixar. At Pixar, a team of creative minds developed a new form of storytelling through computer animation. Eventually, the studio produced Toy Story, the first fully computer-animated feature film. The movie became a massive success and changed the animation industry forever. Years later, Apple acquired Next, and Jobs returned to lead the company he once lost. Under his leadership, Apple created groundbreaking products that reshaped technology around the world. But none of that would have happened if Jobs had allowed failure to define the end of his story. Instead, resilience transformed setback into opportunity. Another powerful example of resilience appears in the life of Nelson Mandela. Mandela spent 27 years imprisoned for opposing the system of apartheid in South Africa. During those long years, it would have been easy to surrender to anger or despair.
But Mandela chose a different path. He used that time to strengthen his mind. He studied, he reflected, he prepared for the future he hoped to help create. When he was finally released, he did not seek revenge. Instead, he worked to guide the country toward reconciliation and democratic leadership. His resilience helped prevent a violent national conflict and inspired people around the world. Mandela's story demonstrates that resilience is not only about personal success, it can shape the future of entire nations. Resilience also plays an essential role in scientific discovery. Consider the work of Albert Einstein. Einstein's ideas about space, time, and gravity challenged long-established scientific beliefs. His theory of relativity initially confused many scientists. Some critics dismissed his ideas entirely. Yet Einstein continued refining his theories and presenting evidence for them. Over time, experimental discoveries confirmed many of his predictions. Today, relativity remains one of the foundations of modern physics. But that acceptance did not happen instantly. It required resilience, the willingness to continue defending new ideas even when others doubted them. Resilience is closely connected to adaptability. The world constantly changes. Technologies evolve. Industries transform. Opportunities appear in unexpected places. Individuals who adapt quickly often discover new paths to success. One modern example can be seen in the career of Jeff Bezos. When Bezos founded Amazon, the company began simply as an online bookstore. But Bezos continually adapted the business model. Over time, Amazon expanded into electronics, cloud computing, digital entertainment, and global logistics. Each expansion required experimentation and risk. Some projects succeeded, others failed. But adaptability allowed the company to grow far beyond its original vision. Today, Amazon is one of the most influential technology companies in the world. This pattern appears again and again. Resilient individuals treat failure not as a final verdict, but as part of the learning process. They recognize that setbacks contain valuable lessons. Every obstacle reveals information about what must change. Every mistake highlights a new opportunity for improvement. Perhaps the most important aspect of resilience is emotional strength. When difficulties arise, emotions often become intense. Frustration, doubt, fear. These feelings are natural, but resilient individuals learn how to move through them rather than becoming trapped by them. They maintain perspective, they remember their larger purpose, and they continue acting even when the journey feels difficult. Over time, resilience becomes a powerful habit. Each challenge faced successfully increases confidence. Each recovery from failure strengthens determination. Eventually, the resilient individual develops an almost unshakable belief that no obstacle is permanent. Life rarely follows a predictable path. Unexpected events appear without warning. Plans must be adjusted. Strategies must evolve. But resilience allows a person to remain steady even when circumstances change. It provides the ability to bend without breaking, to fall without remaining on the ground, to learn without losing hope. The difference between those who eventually succeed and those who abandon their dreams often lies in this single quality, the willingness to rise again and again, until progress finally appears. And in the end, resilience reveals one of the most powerful truths about achievement. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is often the path that leads directly to it.
The journey that begins with you. Every story we have explored leads to a single realization. Great achievements do not appear suddenly. They grow slowly from decisions, habits, beliefs, and actions that accumulate over time. The individuals we admire most,
Innovators, leaders, creators, and visionaries were not born standing at the top of the mountain. They began their journeys at the same place where every human life begins, at the beginning. They faced uncertainty. They faced doubt. They faced moments when success seemed distant or even impossible. But step by step, they continued forward. And through that persistence, their lives gradually transformed. The most important lesson hidden inside their stories is simple. The path of achievement is not reserved for a special group of people. It is open to anyone who chooses to walk it. This truth may seem surprising because when we look at individuals like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, or Marie Curie, their accomplishments appear almost larger than life. They built industries, they created inventions, they changed the course of history. Yet, if we examine their lives carefully, we see something important. They began as individuals with questions, ideas, and determination, nothing more. Their success did not emerge from perfect circumstances. In fact, many of them faced enormous obstacles, failures, financial struggles, public criticism, moments of uncertainty. But they possessed something that allowed them to continue moving forward. They believed progress was possible, and they acted on that belief. Over time, their efforts accumulated into achievements that reshaped the world. The same principle applies to every human life. Progress begins with small steps. Often the first step is simply a decision to learn something new, a decision to develop a skill, a decision to pursue a dream that others may not yet understand. At first, the results may appear small, almost invisible, but small actions repeated consistently produce powerful change. A single page written each day becomes a completed book. A small daily improvement in skill becomes mastery over time. A simple idea developed patiently becomes a successful enterprise. Human potential expands gradually through effort and learning. This process requires patience. Modern culture often celebrates instant success. Stories of rapid achievement fill headlines and social media feeds. But the deeper reality is different. Meaningful success usually grows slowly, quietly, through years of focused effort. The individuals who reach remarkable levels of achievement are rarely the ones who rushed. They are the ones who continued. They stayed curious, they stayed disciplined, they stayed committed to their vision even when progress appeared slow. Consider the journey of Nelson Mandela. For decades, he fought against injustice in South Africa. The struggle required extraordinary patience and resilience. Years passed without visible progress. In fact, many of those years were spent behind prison walls. Yet Mandela never abandoned his belief that change was possible. Eventually, that belief contributed to a peaceful transformation of an entire nation. His story reminds us that time does not diminish determination. When purpose remains strong, even long journeys lead to meaningful destinations. Another example appears in the life of J.K. Rowling. Before her stories about Harry Potter reached readers around the world, she faced numerous rejections from publishers. Each rejection could have been the end of the journey, but Rowling continued. She believed in the story she wanted to tell. Eventually, one publisher recognized the magic within her manuscript. What followed became one of the most successful literary series in history. Millions of readers discovered a world filled with imagination and adventure. But behind that global success stood a writer who simply refused to stop. These stories illustrate a powerful truth. Achievement does not belong exclusively to those who possess rare genius. More often, it belongs to those who refuse to abandon their path. Persistence, discipline, curiosity, resilience, belief, action. These qualities transform ordinary effort into extraordinary outcomes. The remarkable thing is that these qualities can be developed. They are not fixed traits given only to a few. They grow through practice. Each time a person chooses to learn rather than give up, curiosity grows. Each time a person continues working despite difficulty, resilience strengthens. Each time a person takes action instead of waiting, confidence increases. Gradually, these small changes reshape a person's life. The process is similar to shaping stone with flowing water. Each drop appears insignificant, but over time, those drops carve powerful paths through the strongest rock. Human character develops in the same way: quiet effort, consistent action, steady determination. Together, they shape a future that once seemed unreachable. Perhaps the most important realization is this: your story is still being written. Every day introduces new opportunities to learn, to improve, and to move closer to the life you want to create. No matter where someone begins, progress is always possible. New knowledge can be acquired, new skills can be developed, new directions can be explored. History is filled with individuals who began their journeys under difficult circumstances and still achieved extraordinary results. The reason is simple: they began. They took the first step, then another, then another. Over time, those steps carried them far beyond what once seemed possible. The same journey exists before every human being. The future is not a fixed destination. It is a path shaped by the decisions we make and the actions we take. Each moment offers the opportunity to choose growth instead of hesitation, learning instead of stagnation, courage instead of fear. The individuals whose stories inspire the world did not wait for certainty. They moved forward despite uncertainty, and through that movement, their lives expanded. The same potential exists within anyone willing to pursue it. Because the most powerful truth about achievement is not found in history books or biographies. It is found within the human capacity to grow, to adapt, to imagine possibilities that do not yet exist, and then to build them through effort and determination. The journey towards an extraordinary life does not begin with wealth. It does not begin with fame. It begins with a single decision, the decision to move forward. And that journey begins now.